I don't know if you've seen this, but right now there is an incredible tragedy going on in India. The COVID-19 outbreak there has been absolutely terrible. The cases, I don't have the exact case numbers, but it's spreading very, very quickly. One of the pieces of context for what's going on in India right now is it is election season. There's a lot of campaigning. There are large rallies going on. The BJP party of Modi, which is more or less a quasi-fascist party, it definitely is a party with theocratic leanings, if not outright theocracy. They are Hindu nationalists. They believe very much in having a Hindu state, more or less to the exclusion of any other religions. But one of the things that they have exhibited is a wanton disregard for COVID-19 and for the way that it can spread and transmission and such like that. You've seen this with a couple of right-wing governments around the world. This is the case in Israel. It was the case for a long time in Brazil. So Trump tried to play it down, right? There were a whole bunch of governments that essentially were playing down the virus. The difference in India is a couple-fold. One, of course, it's one of the largest countries in the world, I think second only to China, with about 1 billion people there. And also, because it's election season, there are people all over the place. People are interacting with other people and getting them infected. Another thing is the healthcare infrastructure of India is very different. And because a lot of India is rural, it can be difficult to get to hospitals and things like that. So there's a couple of factors that make India kind of different than some of these other countries. However, what's important is that the cases have blown absolutely out of proportion. India has more or less run out of oxygen. There has been some great reporting coming out of a couple of news outlets, Democracy Now! And Al Jazeera specifically have been talking about India. I believe a couple of other smaller outlets also covered it. But one of the reasons that it's spreading so fast, other than the factors I just mentioned, is because India has not had a ton of access to vaccines. Vaccines right now are being hoarded by the richest and most Western countries, typically also the whitest countries. So the United States, some European countries, as well as the United Kingdom. And there have been some other vaccine success stories. Israel has done very well with its vaccine rollout. Unfortunately, they have been mostly exclusionary of the Palestinian population, which is very frustrating and is actually counterproductive, honestly, for all the reasons that I've said in past videos about how this is a race against time, and I will make these cases again. But so now there's a lot of pressure for these vaccines and other health resources to be sent to India. Now, of course, the pharmaceutical lobby is still pushing very hard against a possible patent waiver at the World Trade Organization. So you may have heard about the World Trade Organization. There's been a push, more or less, to say, hey, during this pandemic, because it's so detrimental, because it's so terrible, we are trying really hard to get these vaccines out to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And because of this, we are going to say that the rights, the patent rights, the intellectual property rights to these vaccines can be waived for the time being. This, of course, would allow for many countries who are unable to, right now, because of fear of being sued, to produce generic versions of these vaccines in order to vaccinate their populations and to ensure that we can go back to some relative state of normal, or at least that even if we have to keep getting these types of COVID vaccines every 6 months or what have you, that there is a good supply of vaccines for that to happen. And more importantly, so that there's not a mutation that occurs in the next however long it takes to occur, which invalidates all the progress we've made with the vaccines. So the United States has actually offered to send some vaccines to India. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but they're sending the AstraZeneca vaccines. The reason I point out which vaccine that they are sending to India is the same reason I did it when we were sending vaccines to Mexico. You may know that the AstraZeneca vaccine is actually not approved for distribution in the United States, but we do have a lot of them here. AstraZeneca has factories here. They're creating them here as well as in other places, and we have them to send around the world. I find it very difficult to come to terms with that we are sending vaccines across the world that at home we do not believe are safe enough to give to our populations. This feels wrong. I don't really have a better word for it. It just feels like this is not the way that we should do things. If we're going to send vaccines to other countries, and by the way, I do think we should, I think we should be involved in the COVAX initiative headed by the WHO and the United Nations to get vaccines to poorer countries. We need to be sending vaccines that we think are safe. Now, again, I don't think that the FDA is the end-all be-all of all safety regulations when it comes to medicines. There are plenty of examples where they have approved medicines that have turned out to be very dangerous. I don't really want to get into that now, but the idea that we are saying to the world, as a country, to the world stage, yes, you can have vaccines, but only the ones that we don't think are safe. There's something inherently wrong and problematic there. And I think it's especially troubling when the caseload in India is so high, where the transmission rate is super high, and where there are all these problems with infrastructure. The truth is, what we really need to solve this problem is we need the patent waiver to go ahead. That is the first and very basic step. Honestly, we should not have private pharma companies, whether in the United States or any other country. All this should be done by universities and then distributed by national governments according to need. This would be the real way to create solidarity between countries, but also, and more importantly, to make sure that these medicines are distributed to the people they need without trying to create some profit motive so a few people can get rich while others die starving or die of terrible and preventable diseases. So at the end of the day, the solution here really is to provide India with as many vaccines as possible, especially to do so with vaccines that we think are appropriate and safe. But that's just the first step. What we really need to do is take the next step and waive patent rights to these vaccines. If we're going to do it temporarily, fine, we do it temporarily. Honestly, I think that these should not be patented. They should be available to anyone who needs them. Whichever countries want to should be able to mass produce these vaccines and inoculate their populations. And really, the real transformational step, the real change step that we create here is to say, no, actually, we do not allow a small number of capitalists to take advantage of research that is performed by universities and public tax dollars to buy up those resources, then resell them for a profit and allow people to die of preventable diseases. We need to take away the profit motive from all healthcare, but specifically in this case, from all pharmacare, and either nationalize these industries or simply regulate them out of existence such that the vaccines and other medications that need to get to people who are desperate for these medications, especially in India right now, can get them. Finally, I just want to say my heart and soul goes out to everyone in India who is suffering right now. The footage coming out of India is really hard to watch. If you have the stomach for it, you should check out these reports. You should know. It's very important that we understand the consequences of the inaction that we are taking in Washington and around the world. But truthfully, it's a very sad state of affairs, and I want very much for the people of India to get the vaccines and the medication they need. So brothers and sisters and non-binary siblings in India, I feel for you, and I hope things get better soon.